Welcome to the Mystic Media Channel. I'm your host, Ravina Rastaban, aka the Realist Astrologer. And I've been wanting to do this astrological case study on Andrea Yates for quite a while. I'm sure a lot of my viewers are familiar with this case. And if you're not, I'm going to read from Wikipedia about this case, and I'll be interjecting my comments about her chart and how certain aspects and placements pertain to the story. So I don't know her birth time, so I'm not going to get into the houses and all that. But you could still get a lot of information just by looking at the aspects and the planets and the signs, the stars that are attached to the planets, also asteroids. So I'm going to get into that. So Andrea Pia Yates was born July 2nd, 1964. So that 2 birth number corresponds to motherhood, and it reinforces her Cancer Sun, Mercury, and North Node. So Andrea Pia Yates is a former resident of Houston, Texas, who confessed to drowning her 5 children in their bathtub on June 20th, 2001. She had been suffering for some time with very severe postpartum depression. That deals with her Capricorn South Node opposing her Sun. And postpartum psychosis, that deals with her Cancer North Node and sesqui square to her Neptune Scorpio. She was represented by Houston criminal defense attorney George Parham. Chuck Rosenthal, the district attorney in Harris County, asked for the death penalty in her 2002 trial. He placed the McNaughton rule along with the irresistible impulse test, a legal test for sanity, under close public scrutiny in the United States. She was convicted of capital murder. After the guilty verdict, but before sentencing, the state abandoned its request for the death penalty in light of false testimony by one of its expert psychiatric witnesses. That deals with her Chiron in Pisces opposed to Pluto in Virgo. And if you notice, Chiron's at the 18th degree of Pisces, and I'm always talking about that 18th degree, how it is a murderous degree, or it has the potential to be a murderous degree. Her Jupiter is at the 18th degree as well. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years. The verdict was overturned on appeal. On July 26, 2006, the Texas jury in her retrial found that Yates was not guilty by reason of insanity. She was consequently committed by the court to the North Texas State Hospital. That deals with her Jupiter in Taurus opposed to Neptune in Scorpio. And that is a high security mental health facility in Vernon, and that's where she received medical treatment. And she was a roommate of Dina Schlosser, another woman who committed infanticide, sorry, that's kind of hard to pronounce, by killing her infant daughter. In January 2007, she was moved to a low security state mental hospital in Kerrville State Hospital. Now here's her background. Yates was born in Hallsville, Texas, the youngest of 5 children of Jutta Karen Kohler, a German immigrant, and Andrew Emmett Kennedy, whose parents were Irish immigrants. She suffered from bulimia during her teenage years. Now, that whole bulimia deals with her Cancer energy, but in particular, her North Node in Cancer and sesqui square to her Neptune in Scorpio. Also deals with her Jupiter in Taurus, opposing her Neptune in Scorpio as well, especially this opposition, because Taurus deals with eating. So it could deal with Jupiter Taurus, that could deal with her eating a lot of food. And then the Neptune in Scorpio is her vomiting up the food. Neptune influence can deal with a mental health disorder that is triggering that bulimic tendency. Also, Neptune deals with an addiction. So that dealt with her basically being addicted to throwing up her food. Now, she also suffered from depression at age 17. She spoke to a friend about suicide at age 17. So that deals with her Capricorn South Node opposing her Sun. That's the depression opposition right there. Also, she graduated from Milby High School in 1982. She was the class valedictorian, captain of the swim team, and an officer in the National Honor Society. That deals with her Mercury in Cancer and trine to her Chiron in Pisces. Mercury deals with school, deals with education. That Chiron can deal with being exceptional. And in particular, that deals with her being the school valedictorian, but also her being the captain of the swim team because of that water trine. Yates completed a 2-year pre-nursing program at the University of Houston and graduated from the University of Texas School of Nursing. That deals with her Jupiter in Taurus being in sextile to her Chiron in Pisces, also her Mercury in Cancer and trine to Chiron in Pisces, and also Neptune in Scorpio. So that water grand trine she has involving Mercury, Chiron, and Neptune is perfect for nursing. However, grand trines are not uncommon among serial killers charts. So I've seen grand trines pop up in quite a few serial killers charts. And since it's a water grand trine involving Neptune and Chiron, that can point to mental health issues. It also points to her being on a prolonged regimen of medication, also points to self-containment. Self-containment meaning that she was often existing in a fantasy world of her own making. So you might even can liken this grand trine to schizophrenic symptoms, especially because Mercury is in the mix, dealing with her mind. Now, from 1986 until 1994, she worked as a registered nurse at the University of Texas. So that deals with her Cancer Sun and North Node being in trine to her Saturn in Pisces. In summer 1989, she met Rusty Yates, 2 months her junior, at the Sunscape Apartments in Houston. They soon moved in together and were married on April 17, 1993. That 17 is very telling, the fact that they got married on the 17th, because 17 is a karmic number. It can deal with addiction, drugs. It can deal with secrets. It can also deal with imprisonment, or where the person is in a psychiatric facility, confinement. Now, she married at age 28, which reflects her Sun being at the 10th degree because 28 breaks down to 10. Now, they announced that they would seek to have as many babies as nature allowed. That deals with her Sun being at the 1st degree of Cancer. That 1st degree represents children. Her Sun is conjoined to her North Node. Her North Node's at the 10th degree. That 10th degree deals with children as well, but that also deals with the part where they are saying as nature allowed, because that 10 can deal with limited possibilities. And they bought a 4-bedroom house in Friendswood, Texas. Their first child, Noah, was born in February 1994, just before Rusty accepted a job offer in Florida. So they relocated to a smaller trailer in Seminole. By the time of the birth of their 3rd child, Paul, they moved back to Houston and purchased a GMC motorhome. That right there deals with her Mercury at the 16th degree of Cancer, and it's in sextile to Pluto in Virgo. So following the birth of her 4th child, Luke, Yates became depressed. Again, that's her Capricorn South Node opposing her Sun, pointing to her having children, pregnancy, triggering that depression. On June 16th, 1999, Rusty found her shaking and chewing her fingers. 16 can be a day of catastrophe, can be a day of mental breakdowns. So her chewing her fingers, that deals with her Mars in Gemini. Gemini deals with the hands. Being in square to her Uranus and Pluto in Virgo. So that Uranus and Pluto in Virgo conjunction, that could deal with mental health issues. But Virgo also deals with the fingers. Now, she was admitted to the hospital and prescribed antidepressants. That deals with her Chiron and Pisces being in trine to Neptune and Scorpio. So this trine between Chiron and Pisces and Neptune points to the fact that some of those medications actually did help her to function and help to stabilize her condition. Soon after her release, she begged Rusty to let her die as she held a knife up to her neck. Again, that's that Mars and Gemini square Uranus and Pluto in Virgo. Interesting thing is Uranus is at the 6th degree. That 6th degree can pertain to the neck. Once again, hospitalized, she was given a cocktail of medications, including Haldol, an antipsychotic drug. Her condition improved immediately, and she was prescribed it on her release. Again, the prescription of the drugs is her Chiron and Pisces and trine to Neptune and Scorpio. Basically, you could look at that as it was essentially zombified. She became basically a zombie on those drugs. Also, take into account that her Neptune, representing drugs, was running parallel to Psyche. That's an asteroid that could deal with psychological trauma. It can deal with traumatic experiences that trigger mental health issues. And it just basically deals with her being on the psych meds as well. Now, after that, Rusty moved the family into a small house for the sake of her health. She appeared temporarily stabilized. Now, you see, she got that North Node in Cancer, so that deals with her experiences with motherhood, which she was very unfamiliar with in this lifetime. But it also points to her challenges with her living situation. So, at one point, she was living in the motorhome, but then she ended up like moving into the home. Also, in July 1999, Yates suffered a nervous breakdown, which culminated in 2 suicide attempts and 2 psychiatric hospitalizations that summer. She was diagnosed with postpartum psychosis. Transiting Saturn was opposing her Neptune on around that time, and it was partile, meaning that they were both at the 15th degree. So transiting Saturn was at the 15th degree of Taurus, and it was opposing her Neptune at the 15th degree of Scorpio. The interesting thing is her husband Rusty's Neptune is at the same degree, 15th degree of Scorpio, which comes into play in this whole situation. Now, transiting Pluto was also opposing her Mars and Gemini. On around that time, wait a minute. No, forget about what I was about to say about the moon. Now, Mars was in quincunx to her moon in July of 1999 as well. And then again, take into account that her Neptune is running parallel to Psyche. So that points to her being prone to having nervous breakdown. Now, Yates' first psychiatrist, Dr. Eileen Starbranch, testified that she urged her and Rusty to not have any more children, as it would guarantee future psychotic depression. They conceived their 5th and final child approximately 7 weeks after her discharge. She stopped taking Haldol in March of 2000 and gave birth to her daughter, Mary, on November 30th of 2000. She seemed to be coping well until the death of her father on March 12, 2001. Now, the death of her father is represented by that Capricorn South Node being opposed to her sun, and that triggered the inclination that she had towards depression. Capricorn is the sign of depression, so there it is right there. She was just naturally inclined towards depression. Also, again, take into account that her Neptune runs parallel to Psyche. Yates then stopped taking medication. She mutilated herself. That deals with her Mars and Gemini being in square to her Pluto and Virgo. And she read the Bible feverishly. That deals with her Mars and Gemini, but also her Aries moon being in semi-square to her Jupiter and Taurus. She stopped feeding Mary. Again, that's that moon semi-square Jupiter and Taurus. She became so incapacitated that she required immediate hospitalization. That deals with her Saturn and Pisces, opposed to Uranus and Virgo. On April 1st, 2001, she came under the care of Dr. Muhammad Saeed. She was treated and released. On May 3rd, 2001, she degenerated back into a near catatonic state. That's that Chiron and Pisces opposing Pluto and Virgo. You can also take into account that Saturn and Pisces opposing Uranus and Virgo. So she had it really bad in terms of her having these breaks from reality. Now, okay, on May 3rd, 2001, she degenerated back into a near catatonic state and filled the bathtub in the middle of the day. She would later confess to police that she had planned to drown the children that day. but she had decided against doing it then. She was hospitalized the next day after a scheduled doctor's visit. Her psychiatrist determined that she was probably suicidal and had filled the tub to drown herself. No, she was thinking about drowning those children. She was undergoing that infamous Pluto square Pluto transit during that time, um, May 3rd, 2001, which was a little more than a month before she drowned her children. Also, transiting Pluto was retrograde in Sagittarius during that time, which points to the religious significance and also the large number of deaths. It was 5 deaths in all at one time. So, a large number of deaths that took place at one time committed by one person. So, her natal Pluto is at the 12th degree, and that 12th degree deals with sacrifice and victimization. It also points to the religious influence of this story. Killings. At the time of the murders, Yates' family was living in the Houston suburb of Clear Lake City. She continued under Dr. Saeed's care until June 20th, 2001, when Rusty left for work, leaving her alone to watch the children against Dr. Saeed's instructions to supervise her around the clock. His mother, Dora Yates, had been scheduled by him to arrive an hour later to take over for her. In the space of that hour, she drowned all 5 children. She started with John, Paul, and Luke, and then laid them in the bed. All her children had religious names, biblical names. She then drowned Mary, whom she left floating in the tub. Noah came in and asked what was wrong with Mary. He then ran, but soon caught and drowned him. She left him floating in the tub and laid Mary in John's arms in the bed. She then called the police, repeatedly saying she needed an officer, but would not say why. Then she called Rusty, telling him to come home right away. Now, her Neptune is conjoined to the fixed star Zubin el-Janubi, and that is the drowning aspect because Zubin el-Janubi deals with drowning. Also, her sun runs parallel to the asteroid Eurydice, and that can deal with a murder or a death that she is a witness to or that she has a hand in. Also, on the day that she killed her children, the transiting sun was in sesqui square to her Neptune in Scorpio, and that is the transit that triggered the murders. That's all that was needed to trigger that murderous tendency that she had. Also, transiting Saturn in Gemini was squaring her Uranus. Transiting Saturn in Gemini was in square to her Saturn in Pisces. So she was going through a Saturn square Saturn transit around that time as well. The moon had crossed over her Mars early in the morning. So she must have been up planning how she would carry out the deaths. So here's the transit chart with her natal inside. So as you can see, the moon had crossed over her Mars. So the moon had also crossed over Saturn as well, transiting Saturn, but it had crossed over her Mars. So that shows that she was planning that the murders. And I'm thinking she might have even had a conversation with Rusty before he left for work. And she might have been even pleading with him not to leave her alone. Now, Rusty, when you look at his chart, he's something else. So that brings me to part 2 of this astrological case study. So stay tuned for part 2. I might post it later today. I might post it tomorrow, but stay tuned because Rusty has a lot to do with this situation. So again, some of my viewers probably are familiar with this story, so you probably already know about Rusty and his involvement in this and how he is very much responsible for these murders, just as much, if not even more, than Andrea Yates. So I will be getting into that in part 2. Stay tuned. If you like a reading, you could go to my website at rabita.com. Peace and many blessings.